My name is Alex Oliver and I'm a research fellow here at the Lowy Institute. Late last year, I went to Papua New Guinea on a research project which we call leadership mapping. This is a study we started in East Timor and Samoa a couple of years ago, and we've since interviewed over 100 leaders, whether they be presidents, military leaders, religious leaders, MPs, business leaders, senior bureaucrats, leading journalists, or heads of major civil society organisations. With my interviews, I'm trying to understand how these leaders arrived at their positions of leadership. Ultimately, our aim is to help governments and development partners identify and support leaders in our region as early in their careers as they possibly can. This research diary is an attempt to share some insights from those leaders and provide some background on life in PNG and what the future there might hold. One of the first things that strikes you as you wind your way into Port Moresby from the airport is the contrasts. Construction cranes and high-rise dominate the skyline, but the eye is drawn down to acres of villages built on stilts over the water in the bay. This impression of contrast is one that persists as I travelled across the city for a week in December 2011 on my leadership mapping project. Papua New Guinea is an important neighbour for Australia. Few people realise that it is one of Australia's larger trading partners, as well as it being our nearest neighbour and formerly under Australia's administration until its independence in 1975. It has been Australia's largest recipient of aid, receiving more than $480 million in Australian aid this year. My research visit came at a tense time in Papua New Guinea. While locals were preparing to travel home for their Christmas holidays, in the following week, the 5 judges of the Supreme Court were due to hand down their judgment on the constitutionality of the O'Neill government, which seized control of Parliament in August 2011. The incumbent Prime Minister was the 75-year-old Grand Chief Sir Michael Somare, 3 times Prime Minister of Papua New Guinea since its independence.
Prime Ministers are not installed by courts, not installed by Governor-Generals, it's installed by Parliament. That is why we are a legitimate government that needs to run this country.
Despite the fact that the Supreme Court says that Peter O'Neill's elevation as the Prime Minister was unconstitutional, I think Papua New Guineans are willing to make the sacrifice to overlook that fact and start afresh.
Whatever the political outcome, the next government in residence at the Parliament House in Waigani faces some crucial challenges. How to manage the country's rich supply of resources, rein in corruption and improve services, infrastructure and living conditions for the million or so Papua New Guineans now living in severe poverty.
I think some of the biggest challenges for Papua New Guinea right now rests with leadership. There's got to be a political will to be able to change the way things are operating in this country.
Since independence, we have about 6 prime ministers. And those prime ministers, they run Papua New Guinea. And it's a question of the quality of those prime ministers.
As far as I'm concerned, we've been fighting corruption for 25 years, and we haven't won yet. We're nowhere near winning.
The people just fall for money. They think that anybody who gives them handout are the good leaders.
Transparency International has an office of around 20 staff in Port Moresby. In its latest survey, it ranked Papua New Guinea as the 154th most corrupt nation of 183 nations in the world. On this measure, it scores far below its major Pacific neighbours Samoa, Vanuatu and East Timor. It ranks equally with Zimbabwe and is more corrupt than Iran, Nigeria or Uganda.
It's everyone's business to fight corruption, and you do it, you start at home, and that way you instill respect, you instill discipline and get a better society.
Why members are given money is all about buying their loyalty. And as long as there is movement of members from parties to parties and side opposition to government, it's going to be very difficult.
I get very upset. I get very worried, when I see a lot of people. They struggle to make a living, and the few of us are so far away from them.
There are appalling development challenges facing the nation. The life expectancy of 61 is one of the lowest in the world. Australia's is 82. Around 3 million Papua New Guineans live on less than $1 a day, and only 7% of the population has electricity.
I'd really like to see Australian development assistance having an impact. Unfortunately, it's not having that impact at the moment. I don't think we're seeing a lot of the benefits that we would like to see in terms of health and education.
All our infrastructures are deteriorating. All our health services are deteriorating, education services, transport services. Huge potential in agriculture is not taking place.
Most of the country's population of 7 million is rural-based, earning a subsistence living from agriculture. But there has been a strong drift to urban areas over the last decade or so, causing a complex set of problems. Rising unemployment, particularly amongst young men. Only around 6% of Papua New Guinea's working-age population is expected to be in formal employment by 2015. The contrast here is that the nation's GDP is growing fast, largely due to an expanding resource sector and the massive $15 billion ExxonMobil liquefied natural gas project. The country's GDP grew steadily post-independence, plummeted in the late 1990s, before starting a strong growth trajectory in the 2000s. The economic growth in 2011 is estimated at nearly 9%, almost equal to China's growth rate. It is expected to continue growing strongly in 2012 and beyond, with continued injection of income from LNG as well as nickel and cobalt mining.
So there's enough money in the PNG government budget to do what it takes. And development assistance is only a small bit, but if it could be used wisely to strengthen the financial management system, then it could lead to better effective utilization of all resources, whether it be development assistance or PNG government resources.
The reality is that so far, PNG has been unable to translate this wealth into solving the nation's intimidating array of problems. The dysfunction in politics, the use of government money for slush funds to regional politicians in return for an often ephemeral loyalty, has meant the nation's living standards have deteriorated rather than improved since independence from Australia.
Despite the failings of the Somali government, they have at least recognised that this is a boom that they need to use, and the O'Neill government certainly does as well, and they've been in discussions with the Australian government and with other development partners to ensure that they have the right tools in place to make sure they manage this one well.
I think the Papua New Guinean bureaucracy is also at fault at directing development assistance to areas where they would benefit more than the public at large.
2012 is a time of great change in PNG and a great opportunity for change and for wealth creation and for generational change in politics and generational change in business, and I think Papua New Guinea needs to take advantage of the opportunities provided to it this year.
So, these are some of the serious issues that preoccupy not only Papua New Guinea's leaders, but also its neighbours and development partners. Later this year, I'll be returning to Port Moresby to complete my survey of leaders after the June 2012 election, which will hopefully resolve issues of legitimacy of government and allow a new government to move ahead with some certainty. Back at the Lowy Institute, I'm hoping that the insights we gain from our survey will help the Australian government and development partners learn more about PNG's leaders and what motivates them in dealing with the challenges facing their nation.
We're very blessed. We have so many resources that many other countries don't have, and we've really got to stand up and show something for it.